The new Pakistani state. In West Pakistan, however, despite the cynicism instilled by the later decades of Pakistani history, the initial idealism of the Pakistan movement and its real achievements should not be underestimated. Without them, Pakistan might not have survived at all. In Pakistan's first years, despite political turmoil, many Pakistanis displayed a level of energy and public service that they have never since recovered. These qualities were largely responsible for their country's success in overcoming the quite appalling problems generated by partition, the disruption of trade and the transport networks, millions of refugees, and growing tension with India. As Ian Talbot writes, many of the refugees regarded their journey to Pakistan as a true hijrat, an opportunity for a renewal of their faith. Those who have grown cynical over the passage of time in Pakistan will be surprised by the widespread manifestations of social solidarity and improvisation reminiscent of Britain during Blitz in Second World War, which marked the early days of the state's existence. The late Akhtar Hamid Khan, a former British Indian civil servant and founder of the famous Aurangi Urban Regeneration Project, who moved to Pakistan after partition, told me in 1989 that, ridiculous though that many sound now, he and many younger educated Muslims had genuinely believed that Pakistan could be turned into a sort of ideal Muslim socialist state, drawing on Islamic traditions of justice and egalitarianism, as well as on Western socialist thought. In the lines of Punjabi poet and Muslim leader Chirag Din Junaka, the Qaid-e-Azam will get Pakistan soon. Everyone will have freedom and peace. No one will suffer injustice. All will enjoy their rights. In fact, however, as with later attempts at radical reform, the first years of West Pakistan also turned into the story of the digestion of the Pakistan movement by local political society and culture based on feudalism, kinship, and conservative religion. An experience that was to be repeated under the administrations of Ayub Khan, Ziaul Haq, and Musharraf, all in their different ways, tried to bring about radical changes in Pakistan. All were defeated by the weakness of the Pakistani state and the tremendous undertow of local kinship networks, power structures, and religious traditions. Any hope in the immediate aftermath of independence that reformist elements in the Muslim League might prevail against these traditions was destroyed by the premature death of Jinnah, barely a year later after independence, and his Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan. Without them, the Muslim League quickly disintegrated. This marks a critically important difference with India, which helps explain why these two offspring of the British Indian Empire have had such different political histories. In India, the charismatic leader of the independence movement, Nehru, survived in power until 1964 and founded a dynasty which dominates Indian politics to this day. Thanks largely to Nehru, the Congress Party also survived as a powerful force. Indeed, although a democracy until the 1960s, India was in some respects like Japan. For more than 5 decades after the Second World War, a de facto one-party state, in Pakistan no such party existed. Even had Jinnah lived, however, it was questionable whether the Muslim League could have continued to succeed politically as the Congress did. The League had its origins, its hearts, and by far the greatest part of its support in the north of what was now India. Until shortly before independence, Punjab and Sindh were ruled by local parties dominated by great landowners, in alliance with their Hindu and Sikh equivalents in Punjab and with Hindu businessmen in Sindh. The northwest frontier province was ruled by local Pathan nationalist party in alliance with Congress, and Balochistan by its own local chieftains, several of whom opposed joining Pakistan. The leaders of the new Pakistani state and army were acutely aware of the thinness of loyalty to the new state across most of its territory, and this too helped create the mentality of a national security state, distrustful of its own people, heavily reliant on its intelligence services, and dependent ultimately on the army to hold the country together. The Muslim League was only able to supplant the local Sindhi, Punjabi, and Pathan parties towards the very end of the British rule, when the imminent prospect of an independent Hindu-dominated India stirred up profound fears in the Muslim masses of the region. And even then, the League was only able to prevail because it was joined by large sections of the local land-owning elites, the first of the compromises between reformist parties and traditional local elites, which has been one of the dominant themes of Pakistani history. In consequence, the hopes of more radical elements of the League for land reform were soon buried. All the same, at the start, the top ranks both of the Muslim League and of the bureaucracy were dominated by men from what was now India. This included Jinnah and Liaquat and a large proportion of the senior ranks of the civil service. This added an additional degree of distance from local society to what were in any case not an indigenous state structure and legal system, but ones bequeathed by the British Empire. One must almost say that the composition and the achievements of Pakistani state in its first 20 years were mostly non-Pakistani, a state structure created by the British and largely staffed by officials who had moved from the old Muslim territories in India outside the new Pakistan, a British-created and British-trained army, an industrial class, mainly made up of Gujaratis, also from India. In the decades since, this state has been brought into conformity with the societies over which it rules. In language too, the new state created a double distance between itself and the population. The new national language inevitably was supposed to be Urdu, the language of the Mughal court and army, and of the Muslim Malays and the population in North India. It was not, however, the language of any of the indigenous peoples of West Pakistan, let alone the Bengalis of East Pakistan. The strategy of forcing these populations to go to school in Urdu spurred local nationalist resentments in Sindh and the NWFP, all the more so, as Urdu was not in fact the language of the top elites. These had come, under British rule, to speak English, and in Pakistan English of a kind has remained the language of the senior ranks of the government, of high society and of higher education. The baleful effects of this on the legal system will be examined in the next chapter, while the idea that an Urdu education confers social prestige does not long survive any conversation with young upper-class Pakistanis, whose snobbish contempt for Urdu medium pupils is sometimes quite sickening, so Urdu found itself squeezed from both above and below.